is going to be recorded today. So, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today at the end of term for this very special holiday session on AI in the classroom. My name is Danielle Wise, and I am a learning designer with the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Scholarship. My counterpart here with me is Casey Fulton. She is also a learning designer. So we are so pleased to introduce Peter Fiala, who is an AVFX instructor and also the chair of creative arts here at RDP. He is a modeling, texturing, and lighting artist in feature film and has worked to create the AVFX program here at RDP. Peter is here to speak about his recent work in incorporating artificial intelligence in 3D character modeling for games and visual effects. And without further ado, I don't want to take too much time away from Peter. I will hand it off to the wonderful Peter Fiala.
Right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming, and thanks for the nice introduction. Appreciate it. I was asked to come back and expand on the two-minute segments I did back in October, but actually new stuff sort of came along that affects my area in animation a lot more than what I had shown in the last October presentation. So this is what I wanted to talk about today. And as already mentioned, it's about in the classroom, how do we incorporate AI specifically for today's demo in terms of creating characters and their surface details, like the texture maps that are applied to them. So last year I was doing like text to image AI just to see if I could get good concept art that I could use as a modeler. But now AI's creeped into 3D modeling as well. So again, just how does this belong in the classroom? Does it yet belong in the classroom? And before I talk about AI, I just thought I would mention this is what things were like, what I'll even start calling now traditional VFX. So what you see here is a character made by hand by a human who's had some training, making the model and its surface texture appearance. And the way this was made is polygonal modeling, where it's just extruding of faces, moving of edges, vertices, and faces and welding them together and rotating them. If you do that enough, you end up with a character in this case. And what I want to point out here is that all of the pieces of geometry are intentionally placed, trying to be as economical as possible with the placement of the edge loops and the faces. Again, done by a human thoughtfully. And if you're going to put a texture map, which is the surface appearance, like a two-dimensional image that you wrap around a 3D model, well, there's texture coordinates, which you see on screen right, also called UVs, like the letters U and V. And here you can see that these are intentionally, thoughtfully placed and human readable. So if you were to take this over as an artist, you would very quickly understand what was going on. So here's an example pre-AI of a texturing program where you start with some shaders. You have your 3D model, which you paint on in 3D space. And there you can see the UVs on screen right. And also that it kind of acts, this particular app acts a bit like Photoshop with layers. Okay, so now on to AI. The next few slides that I'll show, I use the combination of things like text to image AI or text to 3D model or image to 3D model. And also near the end of the presentation, I'll show how as a human, I took over from the AI to keep going with the models and the texture maps. So here, this is just a bit of an aside, but this is like DALL-E 3 text to image to create a concept based on a text prompt. And what happened in the past is I was trying to get more than one view, but you couldn't. But now the world has changed in AI, and even without being asked, sometimes I get more than one view and sometimes I don't. So about a year ago when I presented in that evening that one time, I would have stopped here and used these as reference to make the model from. And so yeah, now moving on. What I want to mention now is the AI apps that I use. They're all cloud-based, and you pay for a subscription, sometimes with some nebulous credits. That's hard to equate to dollars. But anyway, on screen left here, you see a text-to-image generated concept. Unfortunately, they cut off his nose. But on screen right, what you see is a preview 3D model. So it thinks for a while and gives you the preview model. And at this point, for most of these apps, you decide, yes, spend the money, and you wait for an hour or so for the model to come back to you. And so I wanted the cool concept on screen left, but what I got was Batman after paying for it. And another time I tried with a different concept, not made by me, but made by AI, and I got Iron Man. Um, Another time, there was this sort of Master Chief from Halo, or maybe like the Doomslayer, something like that. So you can sort of start to see a pattern here. Now, what I don't know, to be honest with you, is how big is the data set that they're training from? Is it all just popular culture models, and is it renders of popular culture models? Or so I'm not really sure, but it just seemed a little bit strange that I was getting back, you know, these obviously well-recognized models. So this is a controversial, one of many controversial talks with Elon Musk, and this is about a week old or 2 weeks old. And the investigative guy on screen left was asking him, because he's starting an AI thing as well now, about the ethics of the data or the images or whatever it might be that the AI is being trained on. And he was basically saying, well, obviously they're all these AI companies are using stuff without permission, even if it's copyrighted. So that was just his opinion, and that's a bit off topic, but maybe that explains why I'm getting these kind of models. So, okay, so back to the lighthearted stuff. Here's a fun concept AI generated on screen left. But what I want to show you is what you see on screen right is a front and back view of what I got from one of the AI apps, cloud-based apps. And I kept trying, and I kept getting the same sort of character. You'll notice that the costume matches more or less ish the costume of the concept, but the head is quite different. It didn't know what to do, I suppose. And I just kept trying, kept burning credits just to see if I could get closer to the concept. So this is a bit early to talk about this because it's sort of a conclusion statement, but when you work as a modeler or texture artist in the animation and visual effects industry, there are concept artists who come before you that work more quickly and do many iterations in 2 dimensions with the people paying the bills or the visual effects supervisor and so on. And you get a concept that's handed to you as a 3D modeler. And at that point in time, it's up to you to make exactly what you're shown. And so just a bit early to make this conclusion, but it seems as though right now the 3D modeler, the human that's well trained, is still needed because what I've shown you thus far isn't really viable in production because none of the 3D models actually matched the concept. So next, I want to move on to now human taking over. So me as a 3D artist taking over from the AI. So on screen left, you see a really cool concept given to me by DALL-E 3 from a text prompt. And he's not all the way from head to toe. And then you see the 3D model that I got in a different cloud-based app that made the 3D model, but it also is missing everything below the knees. So as a human, I went and grabbed some legs from another character, and I did some work in poly modeling packages and digital sculpting packages, and I did some texture painting and so on to come up with this character that's a little bit more unified from head to toe. And so I guess there are varying degrees of human what's the right word? Human taking over of, I suppose, of the AI. And I was just trying to find out what that might be. But at the same time, I was trying to go as fast as possible, trying to see how little I could actually do to make the concepts actually work as 3D models. So I went back and I just added some legs in 2D. Maybe the proportions are a bit off, but I was rushing. And instead of getting this guy again, but with legs, I got something completely different. So I'm going to come back to this character a couple of times on and off, but I want to just quickly point out that one side versus the other has a different sort of color of the texture map. Like one side is kind of white, the other side is sort of bluish gray RoboCop colored. Yeah, okay, so I'll come back to that. But I certainly didn't get what I wanted from the concept, right, after paying for it. So here's the topology of the models that you get back from the AI when you download it. And it's all triangulated. If you blur your eyes, it actually does look and feel like the character. But I was wondering, since I've been doing the photo modeling, photogrammetry for about a decade now, when I fly my drone around and make 3D models of terrains, they come back triangulated like this before you do any effort to clean them up. So I can't help but wonder if there's a connection, and I'm not sure just yet. Okay, so here's an example from about 10 years ago from the Fonk Museum in Viña del Mar, where they took this moai away from Easter Island and put it outside their museum. But this is how photogrammetry might work, just for the record. So you take a bunch of photos. This is me standing on the ground around the statue. And then you get the messy geometry. Then you clean it up as a 3D artist. And then you clean up the texture maps that are wrapped around it, the color map and the normal map. And you get your 3D model. So I wonder if the AI is doing something related to that. Okay, so just like the terrain that I showed earlier, when you get the models back from the AI cloud-based apps, you'll see that the texture coordinates are sort of difficult to understand as a human. If you can think right back to the beginning of my presentation where I showed how a human might lay out the texture coordinates, the UVs. And so now imagine you're the 3D artist and you're told, okay, Peter, hurry up and fix up this texture map for me. And maybe you only have Photoshop or something. That's going to be very, very difficult for you to know as a human what's going on. Okay, so anyway, back to this character. What I did is I just picked one side and I made the character symmetrical in a digital sculpting package, just for ease of use later on. And also it looked kind of strange when one half of it was textured one way versus the other half. So here I've gone and I've made my own human readable texture coordinates. And I then took the model into a different online cloud-based AI app where you pay money, and in exchange for credits, it gives you a texture map on top of the 3D model. So I gave these screen captures from ZBrush, the digital sculpting package, as the guiding images that the AI would use to make a texture map. But once again, I got Iron Man. So this is a completely different app than the one I showed earlier. So I wonder about a limited data set. Can't quite be certain. But yeah, so this is also a little bit confusing to look at, to wonder what's actually going on there in the design of the character, the texture map that it gave me. But that's where we're at right now. So I tried several times and I kept getting this sort of strange patterns on the character. The character is actually facing forward with his nose like looking over towards screen left. But what it actually looks like is you can't tell, is he coming or going? Like, is that the front or the back of the character? Right? So I kept trying. Here's just a few iterations, kept trying different things, sometimes just a text prompt instead, and somehow landed upon this variation, which I quite like. So I kept this guy and I decided to work with him a little bit further. I just painted his eyes symmetrically and that kind of thing just to clean it up. But again, trying to limit the amount of work I put in because it was mainly trying to test what the AI could do. So here's how the texture map looks in a human readable way. And one of the things I wanted to point out is maybe there's room for this AI generation of 3D characters with their texture maps. If they're background characters, so maybe you can picture like a space station full of like 100 of these aliens wandering around doing their thing. Maybe it's okay. Maybe it would work. And in this case, excuse me, it's the same geometry with two different texture maps on it, looking like a different character. So maybe there's viability there. Something I wanted to make mention of that may or may not mean anything to people outside of animation, but there's this, the way the texture maps and the shaders, the materials are working on characters these days, or anything in computer animation, visual effects or gaming, is physically based rendering, or PBR for short. And so in your material, you have, in your shader, you have several channels that you plug in, say a color map or the metalness or the roughness or the normal map. And so that's one of the ways that I think AI cloud-based apps will be used in the future, is you'll come up with a character somehow, you'll come up with maybe the base color texture map, and you'll upload it to get all of the PBR textures back. That's a possibility that I think maybe might happen going forward. Okay, so here we have some of the rejects, of which there were many that didn't quite, I didn't want to work any further on for various reasons. One looks just a lot like the Mandalorian, another one looks a bit like the Halo Master Chief, And then the character on screen right is amazing, but I didn't know what to do with it because I was trying to make like bipedal humanoid characters. So here's the cast of characters that I ended up with in the end. And when I was looking at this, I can understand if you are not in animation, how this might not uh, be very interesting. They're just sort of standing there. And they're standing there in either like a T pose, like the guy third from the left, or an A pose, like everybody else. And this is for the sake of putting in the skeletal armature and joining the geometry to the bones, like the puppet rig, so that you can animate it. Some are too, in some cases, what the AI gave me, the arms are too close to the thighs, like the hands, and maybe the biceps are too close to the back muscles. But anyway, I thought what I should do is do something a bit more interesting with these characters, since you've all sort of given me your lunchtime. And so when I saw those characters standing there, it reminded me of a movie that I saw in the theater with my family called The Right Stuff. And there's this famous scene with the astronauts walking down this sort of tunnel looking cool. And that was, of course, so well received that they used it in Armageddon and even in Monsters, Inc. So I wanted to make my own version of that. So here's a spaceship hallway that I'll talk about in a minute. And here we have our characters walking forward in slow motion, looking cool. Yeah. So just this is a bit off topic, but I wanted to show you how I started to try and make the background. It's an AI generated image, and I'll show you a bit more about it in a minute. But I tried to use a different type of AI that's coming out now, where um, you can make an image into a video. And in spite of my best efforts to make the settings cooperate, this is what you kind of get. It just, from frame to frame, it doesn't stay consistent. So even though it's moving forward like I asked it to, it's changing too much. So I couldn't really use that in that shot that I just showed you of the characters walking forward. So here we have the image that I got out of DALL-E 3 from my text prompt. And I thought it would be really cool if I ran it through the same image to 3D model apps that I've been using, the AI stuff to make the characters. But all I got was somehow just the very end, where you see out into space, some sort of a couch pillow kind of shape, which unfortunately wasn't all that usable. So what I ended up doing for the background then is just using the generative fill in Photoshop. So nowadays, products like Photoshop have AI integrated into them quite a bit. And so here's what I got for the extension of the frame, just so it could be 16 by 9, which is what I like to work in most of my classes. Okay, so then here's just the characters walking, just for fun, just so you can see how it's all put together. So this is just a rehash of that slide I mentioned earlier, with the concept that right now the AI can't match the 3D model to the concept perfectly. And so without a human who's a well-trained artist intervening, you can't necessarily use AI in production just yet. And this slide here, what I wanted to get across was, I'm a little worried that we're going to have a generation of young people that just know how to make a text prompt into a 3D model, like on their iPhone or something, and they submit it as a demo reel, excuse me, to the animation studios. And Thor here would represent like the VFX supervisor or the recruiter, who all came up the hard way and know how to do their craft. And they're not really going to accept that you actually a modeler or a texture artist. Sort of like, you're a 3D modeler, are you really though? Right? So I'm worried that we're going to have a generation coming up of people that's what they'll see themselves as. Anyway, here's a couple of disclaimers. Right now, I don't think any students should be doing this and putting it on their demo reel. Just with the amount of effort I put in to the characters that I showed you, that's not really good enough. It's not production viable. And also, I wanted to make a disclaimer that when you see the characters moving now and in a couple more shots that I'll show you, I took shortcuts for the rigging and the animation. And if you're one of my animation students in our program watching right now, you're trained properly by people that know what they're doing. So do it the proper way, even if that seems like not much of a shortcut. So yeah, that's just my disclaimer for you. Okay, and this is just another repeat slide saying that you really do need right now, as a 3D modeler and texture artist, you do need the training. still the old-fashioned way. Um, and maybe you'll be able to work over top of what AI gives you initially. But I also have down at the bottom here that maybe if the characters are far enough in the background, like a shot like this, maybe here's another space station AI generated image. If you can picture in the foreground, maybe there's some human beings like real world actors in rubber masks, and maybe some very high end CG characters in the foreground. Maybe they are enough to take the attention away. But maybe if you just need some characters in the background and they're doing their thing, maybe the AI is good enough for that. And I have this slide here because this is about a month old. The Sam Altman, who's been all over the news lately, and they were talking about AI in general, saying that like right now, this is the dumbest it will ever be. So if you can picture as a 3D modeler and texture artist, how fast the tools have evolved in the past year, who knows what they'll look like 6 months from now. So I just wanted to recap here. The non-AI traditional software I used is the usual suspects, and then the AI apps that I used. The only one in the list that's not cloud-based is Photoshop, which I have installed on my computer at home. And I imagine that right now, until the products listed above, like Maya and ZBrush and Marmoset and so on, and Substance Painter, until they integrate AI right into the update that you download and you use on your computer, I'm not sure how much 3D artists will use this stuff because it's all just cloud-based and each one has a different subscription model. Each one gives you varying qualities of results, and you don't really know what you're going to get. Yeah, all right, so that's pretty much that. And what I wanted to have here is these the AI characters that they wanted to say thank you and that they're grateful for you joining me in this lunch hour talk. Okay. Now, for questions, I wanted to just start things off by saying you might be wondering, why is there a banana on the screen? It was actually my brother's idea because we were wondering what non-pop culture like Iron Man or Batman type things has it been trained on yet? So took a picture of a banana on the counter and used AI in Photoshop to remove the background. And what I got in return, I was actually hoping for a banana in an Iron Man suit, but I actually got like a regular banana, which means they must be training it on regular everyday objects as well. Okay, with that, that's it for me. So are there any questions or comments from anybody? Ah, yeah, Kyle, go ahead.
Thanks for the excellent presentation. I'm coming from a non-animation or VFX background, but maybe you can answer the question. Obviously, the AI-based services had required you to do a lot of work after the fact, but was any of it actually a time saver, even if you had to go back and fix some of what they produced?
Yeah, good question. Thank you. I would say at this point, not necessarily. Um, if the only way I can see, this isn't quite a direct answer, but the only way I can see it being a time saver is if you just want, say in this case, this whole presentation was about space aliens kind of thing. If you just wanted a bunch of variety of space aliens walking around in the background somewhere and you didn't really care what they looked like, then maybe it would be. But if you had specific art direction you needed to adhere to, then I would actually say no. You might even be better off just, in fact, not might. I think you are better off just using the skills you would be trained in. Yeah, thank you. Okay, hold on. Let's see. I'll read the rest of it. Yeah. So the question is, if someone using like the AI generated design that was very like Iron Man-esque, uh, would they see themselves in copyright infringement territory? That's a very good question. If it was for money that you were doing something, that I would imagine yes, they would be. However, if it's like a student demo reel or if it's like fan art or something, um, Yeah, so then I can see maybe it doesn't matter so much if you're just like a doing something for fun as a hobby, or because I mean, lots of people make even clay sculptures of their favorite, I don't know, Spider-Man or something like that. But for sure, if they were going to try and use this for money, I just can't see how it's not copyright infringement. Thanks, Megan. Yeah. Tanya.
Hey, Peter.
Hi.
Thank you. That was the best use of my lunch in a long time, so I really appreciate it. I have a question about the creativity component because there's the task and the routine things that need to get done to take an idea to a 3D model. So, how much are you encouraging AI as part of the creative process, and how much of it would be beneficial for just the task-oriented piece? Because even going into a DALI, is that a route that we see ourselves going down more and more, or are we going to be pulling back and really attaching us back into that creative human aspect?
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So I think I'll just a bit of background. Over the past year or so, in terms of 2D concept art, I've left it open to the students as something they can do if they want to add to. Like if they're going to make a model for me in one of my classes, they always have to give me a concept and some reference. And the thing is that they need to figure out the reference, and pardon me, they need to figure out the concept from all angles. And usually the AI can't do that for you. So they still have a lot of human work left to do. And I think that most of the students actually so far weren't really even interested in it, in using AI at all. So that was something maybe I didn't quite expect, but that's been the reaction so far. And I still feel like that. I'm not sure if this directly answers your question, but I still feel like they certainly need to be properly trained, regardless of wherever AI goes. Yeah. So I hope that answers what you're asking. Um,
It does. I'm just really curious on how much we're accepting of what the AI
oh,
gives us from a creative piece, and how much we're saying, that's not acceptable from a artistic or interpretation piece. But that's, yeah, it's as we go along, right?
yeah. I don't have
Mhm.
a definitive answer for sure yet.
Yeah.
And actually, to to tie your question into the one typed by Danielle in the chat, to elaborate further how this is going to be um, incorporated into the classroom. Right now, I don't necessarily see it that way. Like I'm teaching a digital sculpting class in the winter coming up, and we won't be starting with any AI at all. Maybe for the concept, the 2D concept, but not for the actual sculpting, like the the work done by hand. And I'm still actually not sure, and I'm not honestly not ready to bring into the classroom in full force. I need to keep working behind the scenes to see, and also we need to talk to the studios to find out how much of it they're using. Because actually, back to Tanya's, or maybe it was Tanya's question, but uh, they the studios would be using AI for mundane things like removing green screens, something like that, but not necessarily for the creative character work. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Casey. So is there an yeah, I think that's it for me, unless there's any other questions. Seems like we're
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you very much, Peter, for coming and joining us today.